Color grading, especially vlog footage, can be quite hard. I'm Paul, I'm a German filmmaker. Lumix S5 color grading. I use my Lumix S5 for my professional work and for my YouTube videos. When I shoot vlog, I overexpose my footage a little bit because this camera sensor works extremely good in overexposing footage and then showing you an image which is quite amazing. It's 14 plus stops of dynamic range, and I was in a lost place in Germany, which is already pretty cool. I show you how I color grade with footage and how to play around with Lumix S5 vlog footage, 4K 10-bit footage. Here we go. Let's start this little color grading tutorial with a Lumix S5 4K footage. I was in a pretty cool lost place in Berlin, Germany, and this is my Lumix S5 footage. We have some shots here I arranged. I have already some music in it, and we have a lot of different shots here, mostly B-roll, some shots of me flying my little drone, and some pretty shots. These shots are showing the dynamic range of my camera because you can see here we have a lot of highlights, we have a lot of shadows, and we see actually a lot. Then we have some footage where we can see some depth of field, and again some footage with pretty dramatic change of dark areas and bright areas. We will see here if we can save this overexposed area here, some normal exposed areas, again some footage which is pretty hard for a camera, dark areas and pretty light areas. Always when you film something and you have a situation like this where you film into a room and you have light outside, usually this will be overexposed due to dynamic range, but the Lumix S5 is pretty powerful when you use it in vlog. Also in this kinds of situation we will see if we can save the other way around, if we can save this dark areas here, and we will see some clouds here, of course, but how we manage to make this visible we will see. And here we have a lot of different shots here, and let's start at the beginning. We have some cool shots here. Let's start actually with this shot. No, let's start with me with this shot. So when I start my color grading, obviously this is shot in vlog, that's shot in 4K. My timeline shows this in 720p because of editing reasons. You want to save some performance and you don't need a 4K timeline. You don't want to export in 4K, but you don't have to work on your footage in 4K. I can work on my footage in 4K due to my PC, but I think not when I record this. So the camera LUT. My Vegas 19 has some pretty nice in-camera conversion LUTs, and we have a lot of different LUTs here from Blackmagic cameras, etc. The vlog LUT for Panasonic is right down here, and we have here some color wheels. Again, some color wheels and some color wheels which only change the values in the parts we choose. Only highlights. I know a lot of people say this also only highlights midtones and dark areas, but these are the basically real ones that really only change things in the highlights. So as we already can see here, our footage looks pretty good. We can now do this typical S-curve, but the typical S-curve in a vlog doesn't have to be the typical everyone is doing like this here, and well, you're stealing a bit of dynamic range from your footage because that was already okay exposed. You can move the center of contrast maybe down here a little bit or up here a little bit because I want to have this okay exposed. I want to see a little bit more from my clouds, and when I move this down actually, you see here you have a lot of more clouds visible than this. I always look on my RGB parade. That would be maximum brightness, that would be maximum darkness, and we can see here that the Lumix S5 can handle bright areas pretty insane. We can save a lot of this footage. So clouds should be mostly white, so let's make this almost white. That looks a little bit flat for me. I want to have a little bit more push in my image, so I want to be a little bit more greenish because I like this green tint that looks I think it looks really cool for me. I do it a little bit more exaggerated because we are on YouTube here, and due to compression you see don't maybe the slightest changes. I want to lift up my shadows a bit. I want to have my shadows also a bit greenish, and my gain will be a little bit more yellow. I go now to the Werkzeuge, which is in German because I am from Germany, and we can add also some contrast here, but we can also add some saturation or take some saturation away. I want to take some saturation from this footage because I want to make it a little bit more flat. I want to make this footage now, let's see if we can make it a little bit bluish, not reddish, bluish. Then it looks a little bit cooler in my opinion. The Lumix S5 is very powerful when it comes also to colors. That's also everything filmed in 10-bit. We can make it really colorful here, but I don't think that will fit the scene. Let's make it actually a little bit darker here. Move the contrast center down. I want to keep the clouds so in this area, so I move this down here and bring it down here, so this has a little bit more contrast in it in the dark areas, which is pretty cool in my opinion. Now let's see if we have a shot which is a little bit more complicated. We have here a lot of parts which are dark and bright, and let's see what we can do with this. Yes, we can also use a LUT. Let's use this Vlog2 Rec 709 LUT, and we already have a pretty cool image. We have more contrast in it. Actually, we doesn't even need to change this curve because we have already a nice contrast curve. We can but make this footage, we can save some highlights again, or let's do some really dramatic here. Let's bring this down. We don't need information here. We want to focus on the highlights. Dynamic range is good when you have it, but you don't always need so much dynamic range. Sometimes you want to focus on the highlights. Let's focus on the highlights because this pattern here looks pretty cool. The highlights, we can move this slider here and make the highlights pretty orange. You see, that works quite well because we also filmed in 10-bit. I think that looks, it looks okay. Let's see what we can do with the color wheels, with changing a lot more than only highlights. That changes also the scene a little bit in this area, which I like. The middle tones, let's see what we can do with the middle tones. That works a little bit cooler. You see, that changes only the middle tones. That wheel doesn't move this area here. That stays basically the same, but these tones get changed in the middle section here. So let's make them a little bit more greenish and a little bit more blue. We can also darken them or brighten them up. I think I want to darken them because we want to focus on these highlights here, which look pretty cool in my opinion. We don't want to bring these shadows up. I think that little change is already pretty cool. I like this shot. And now we can also do a little trick when you use in Vegas 19. Right click on this, then you say copy. I don't know if this will be recorded also, but then you click on this clip, right click, add events attributes, and you click on it and boom, you have shifted this color from, you bring basically this color grading from here to here. Actually everything you do here can you do there. And I show you another little cool trick here. You can also move the contrast center down to have a little bit more light in the shadow, but it looks over exaggerated here. And contrast, you have already a lot of contrast in this scene, so you want to have maybe a little bit more visible in the shadows here, which looks pretty cool in my opinion. The Vlog of the Panasonic S5 is, I mentioned, very powerful. You want to maybe see some kind of this here. that looks also pretty cool. Let's move it without a LUT, because everyone is using a LUT. Then you have Rec 709, and then you go from here. So let's work with this footage without a LUT. I want to see a cool scene where these lights are visible and the shadows are falling a little bit behind. We don't need so much information in the shadows. That is almost crushed completely black here. But I want to have a little bit more color here. Let's pop these color wheels up. We see here we have barely a little bit of color, only 20, because this shot is not so colorful. I mean, we're already in a not so colorful area. It's in a lost place, mostly gray, brown. The gain, I want to have these lights a little bit more, you know what? I want to keep them white, but I want to make them a little bit brighter. That's why I move these lights up. You can see here that these lights are now they would be overexposed, crushed. I want to have them here. We can also use the vector scope and waveform monitor. We can see here that's 100% brightness. When I move this up, I have here 100% brightness, which is okay because this is light, and light is 100% bright mostly. So let's make the light, let's make it a little bit bluish because it looks pretty cool. For YouTube, a little bit more bluish. The tools we have here are also contrast and center of contrast. Center of contrast is pretty interesting because we can move the contrast center, let's overdo it, from the dark areas to the bright areas. That's too much here to show it you. That basically shows you where the contrast is, in the dark areas or the bright areas. So a little bit of contrast. We want to have the whole picture again in a little bit green, and that looks pretty cool. Again, we stole some dynamic range from this beautiful dynamic range vlog footage, but the Lumix S5 is very powerful in my opinion. As you can also see here, you have dark areas and light areas. I used the Panasonic vlog LUT again to have already a pretty cool scene, which is not underexposed, it's not overexposed. You can basically work with this footage. That will look very good already. You can play with this footage now. You can make it a little bit more greener. You can pump up the colors a little bit. Actually, this green, let's make it a little bit more bluish, so that maybe it's a scene from some Chernobyl movie or something. Actually, then when we making a movie, we have to bring the saturation a lot more down than this, because movies are looking sometimes a little bit flat. Besides you're making a Pixar movie, or I don't know, but let's work with some little bit color here, since we're on YouTube and we want to show some colors. In the shadows, we can add a little bit of pink here, or purple. That looks pretty cool, only a little bit. And then we work on the highlights on the opposite, a little bit greenish. That's mostly basically the opposite of teal and orange, but I think when you go some different routes, you will see some different results, as you don't want to be the fish which is swimming in the same direction as every other fish. You want to do some things extra. Let's move to this scene here. Pretty interesting scene, right? We have ultra dynamic range here. Let's see if we can save these highlights here. Maybe use the vlog LUT at first to Rec 709, and well, that's overexposed. Let's see if we can save this information. I don't think we can save this information. It's already clipped here. When we have the color wheels, we can bring it down. No, there's actually no information in this area. Well, it's a pretty hard shot for a camera because we are inside here and we cannot see outside here. Even not when I change this to video area. Now we're working, I think, in a 10-bit space or 32-bit space actually. And when we bring this now down. We don't see so much either, but that's okay. We can work with this footage. Let's see if we have a better example how you can save some dynamic range in your shot, because the Lumix S5 is very powerful. I have some different shots here. Here, that was the shot I worked on this footage previously, where I want to show you how much you can save with some dynamic range. We have a camera LUT, vlog to Rec 709, and let's bring this down here. No, you cannot all. You can also not see this here. Let me see if I can find this shot which I wanted to show you. Ah, this was this shot here. This shot was also pretty nice. I thought I would destroy it in my camera. I didn't saw this here that was basically overexposed in my camera, so change it to vlog. And when I use now my color wheels, when I change the highlights, you can see that you have some information in the highlights. You can make them a little bit more warmer, and you can bring them down. You see actually a lot of clouds here. We have some texture, some patterns here, some clouds. And as we can see in our waveform, we have some information here which you can save. Let's bring this a little bit down. Then let us see some, you know what? Let's don't make it warmer. Let's make it a little bit green. Maybe we are in the Matrix or something. Let's make it a little bit green. That looks cool in my opinion. We can bring up the shadows a bit and want to have a little bit more contrast, but don't want to lose the information in the cloud. So I move my center of contrast down to have a little bit more down here. That looks pretty cool in my opinion. This shot already looks like a movie for me. Not like a movie, but it looks different. Not so teal and orange-ish. It looks pretty cool in my opinion. So maybe we want to add more green to the floor, and then we want to change the middle tones a bit. Let's make it a little bit more magenta. What happens when we use a lot of magenta? Not much, not much. Actually, this changes the scene a little bit. I don't know if you can see it in YouTube, but I think that looks pretty cool. That color, that wheel would change the scene pretty dramatically, as you can see here. I like it when it looks a little bit greenish. And the Lumix S5 again can save some information. Here, this shot looks also like we can save some information in the highlights. Let's see if we can do this. Maybe we can do this. Let's use the camera LUT here. Let's use the vlog LUT again, and let's see if we can save some information. Some information, yes, but not everything. Due to YouTube compression, I don't think if you can see this, but this lamppost here will become visible when I bring this down here. I could now create a mask around this here to bring only this area down. Let me see if I can show it you real quick. When you have a mask here, then you want to add some special sauce to your color grading, and you want to make it quick and dirty tutorial here. You make basically a mask here, zack. Then you have a mask. Then you say to this mask that is positive, and let's change the color of this shot real quick. Let's bring this down. So this mask, you can already see it's too sharp and we have some pretty rough edges, but we can feather these edges when we basically go on our masking tool. Kantenverlauf means basically feathering. We say to the outside, we change from 0.0 to basically this. Then we have a nice mask. When you work now with this mask, you can also say to this mask it's negative. That looks also pretty cool. That looks pretty cool, basically. That looks pretty nice. You can bring this footage down and keep this bright. That looks pretty cool in my opinion. Focus on something, and then you can actually only work on the color on this area here. Maybe when you just want to work on this area here and not on this area, you need to work with some mask. And yeah, you bring some color in here, maybe some more color even. Let's do some more saturation. Yeah, that looks pretty cool in my opinion. And you created a pretty drastic change. Let's mute this here. That's the shot without the mask. That's the shot with the mask. That's pretty cool in my opinion. Again, we have here a shot with a lot of dynamic range. The Lumix S5 has maybe 14 plus stops of dynamic range, which is a lot for a camera. And again, use the Vlog LUT. As you can see, you lose maybe some information in the highlights. But that looks pretty cool in my opinion. Let's do some cool thing when you have an area which is basically overexposed, as this area over there. You see, you have no information in this shot. It looks a little bit dumb. Don't try to save it as hard as you can. Maybe focus on the things which are important. Maybe these two guys here which walking on the shot. Then you can add a nice cool effect to this shot. And let's emulate a little filter, a glowing filter. You have a little, it's everything in German here. Glowing. And when you want to have a glowing light, then you say you want to change, no, not everything, compression. And you want to make these lights a little bit more shiny, like a Cine Soft filter. And you have a pretty cool effect here. Unterdrückung. Yeah, that looks... now I have it. Yes, intensity. That's quasi percentage. And then you move this a little bit up. Yeah, that looks pretty cool in my opinion. And then you can work with the overexposing of this feature that makes the lights like shine into the camera. It makes the lights a little bit softer, which gives this a unique effect in my opinion. That looks pretty cool in my opinion, because you have like this Cine Soft filter on your camera. And yeah, I like this. That looks sometimes pretty cool in my opinion, because then you focus on this area and not so much on this area. That can be overexposed, that's no problem. And yeah, the Lumix S5, like I said, is pretty powerful. It works pretty well in daylight. You have to overexpose your footage a bit. That's my last tip. When you work with Lumix S5 and want to shoot in Vlog, overexpose your footage, because Vlog looks best when it's a little bit overexposed. It looks already pretty cool here. You have a lot of dynamic range, especially outside. The Lumix S5 handles light amazing. Bringing up shadows is okay in the Lumix S5. Sony camera sensors works better when bringing up the shadows. The Lumix S5 works amazing when you overexpose a bit. I wanted to show you a scene where we want to bring up some shadows. Here, the Lumix S5 has a sensor which can handle bright areas amazing. We have a lot of dynamic range in bright areas, not so much in dark areas. When, let's make it easy here for us, that's basically crushed here. We have no information in the highlights, no information in the shadows. When I move the highlights, you see in the vector scope on the left hand side that only moves like thunderstorm outside my clouds. So when we bring up the shadows, that doesn't quite work well because we have not so many information here. I now have to go and add some contrast here again. So color wheels, I want to lift up the shadows. That doesn't work so good. We have not so many informations in the dark areas here. When I bring this up, that already falls apart. Doesn't look good when you work with the Lumix S5. Make sure to maybe overexpose. Bringing up shadows doesn't work quite well in the Lumix S5. Bring it back here, everything. back. That doesn't look easy to bring up, as you can see here. That bring a little bit color in it. That doesn't look pretty cool. You cannot bring the shadows to life in the Lumix S5. It's not totally impossible, but it's a little bit harder than changing from a Sony camera. Especially when you come from a Sony camera, you have to change your style of shooting. So that's basically it. That's the little Lumix S5 vlog color grading tutorial I have for you here. Like I said, the Lumix S5 works basically best when you overexpose. So this was my little color grading tutorial from my Lumix S5. I use this camera for my professional work and my YouTube videos, and mostly I use vlog for my YouTube videos because the natural color profiles are also pretty nice in this camera. But this dynamic range is awesome in this camera, as you can see. And when you don't have infinite amount of dynamic range, focus, as I showed you, on the lights and or crush the shadows, focus on the lights, or the opposite. And maybe when you have a way to have infinite dynamic range in the camera, maybe I should do my infinite dynamic range hack video. But that's in the next video. Subscribe to my channel if you want to learn more about this German filmmaker. See you in the next video.